you have your Bibles, you can turn to John chapter 15, verse 13. John chapter 15, verse 13. And the scripture simply says this. Whoops, we're a little ahead there, Ruth, but I'll take us back a bit. Take us back to slide number 1, if you can, Ruth, please. John 15, verse 13 says this, "Greater love has no man than this, a man lay down his life for his friends." Greater love has no man than this, a man lay down his life for his friends. Father, we thank you for this day. We pray, Lord, that now you will just help us to hear your voice, not mine, that you will hear your ideas and not mine, and that, Lord, as always, we will see you upon the cross and what that means to us. May you bless us today. We ask and pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, today we honor our veterans in preparation for November the 11th, which is Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day is a day of reflection for us. We need to think about our veterans. We need to think about what they faced, because let's be honest, throughout the year we take a lot of what they did for granted. World War I vets, World War II vets, Korean vets, Vietnam vets, Gulf Wars I and II vets, Afghanistan vets, and peacekeepers, of course, in their postings all around the world. We need to reflect and to be thankful for them. I think that we can all agree here this morning that there is nothing free about freedom. There is nothing quite so expensive as freedom. It is bought with the blood of men and women who love their country and countrymen enough to die for them. While we may mourn their untimely passing on Remembrance Day, we should also be thankful that men and women like them lived and fought for us so that we could meet here on Sundays and we could have freedom of religion. There are many things needed to ensure victory in a time of war and conflict. You need troops, you need weapons, you need technology, you need intelligence and information gathering, but there is one thing that is absolutely essential if you're going to win a war. There is one thing that you are absolutely essential to have if you're going to have allies, and that one thing is unity. Now, unity is the state or fact of being united or combined into one. It is an undivided, it is an unbroken completeness. And when the allies have unity, there will be victory, because unity brings victory. Now, when we think about unity, some of us kind of get a little afraid and we think, is it going to take away my individuality? Does it mean that there's no diversity? No, that's not what it means at all. Let's take World War II as an example of that. Did unity mean that the Allies all spoke the same language? Well, no. They spoke English and French and Polish and Greek and Russian and Chinese and more and more. Does it mean that there's that they're all the same ethnicity? To have unity, do you have to have the same ethnicity? No. In World War II, there were white people, there were black people, there were Native American people, there were Hispanic people, there were Chinese people, there were even some of the Maori tribe from New Zealand. They all, does unity mean that you all have to have the same customs? No. Think about it. There were 16 different countries involved in the Allies, and they all had 16 different customs and traditions. But as unity grew among the Allies, the things that divided them fell away, and they truly became one people. Now, were there differences of opinion? Absolutely. Were there differences of approach? Absolutely. Were there differences of tradition? Absolutely. But unity brought victory. Never before have I ever seen our country, or even, if you will, the United States, as disunified as it is today. Never before have I seen us as divided as we are along the lines of gender and race and economics and politics. We need unity today. We need unity in our country. We need unity in our families. We need unity in our church. And we need to win the victory. And only unity will bring the victory. So as we look at the Allies, as we look at what happened in World War II, what can possibly have brought unity to people in such a time of conflict? Well, there are several things that bring unity. Number one is this. There is the unity of a recognized conflict. There is the unity of a recognized conflict. Now, a conflict is very simply this. To come into collision or disagreement, to be contradictory, at variance or in opposition and clash. Conflict can either divide or unify. And as we've seen, the conflict in our country and in the United States at this time is doing a great job of dividing, but it can also unify. As Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided itself cannot stand. And I think that's what we're seeing in our country today. And yet, we have an illustration in the Bible of how a conflict can be a rallying point. Young David, who was going to see his brothers one day on the battlefield, and he was to take some food to them and to see how they were doing on behalf of his father. And of course, this was the time when Goliath was standing up to the children of Israel, and Goliath would come into the valley, and he would cuss them out, and he would swear at them, and he would call them cowards, and all of this sort of thing. And David said, well, how come nobody's down there fighting him? How come nobody's down there fighting this guy because of all the things that he's saying about the children of Israel? And of course, his brothers were very upset with him, and they said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what it's like. And David made a very simple comment when he said, is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? And it was at that point when David went to meet Goliath and defeated Goliath on his own that he became a rallying point for the children of Israel, and they began to become victorious in their unity. Same thing happened throughout the 30s. Churchill warned of conflict with Hitler time and time again, and for all that he said, the elite politicians of Britain called him a warmonger. We all know, and we probably all seen the video of British Prime Minister of the time, Neville Chamberlain, who went in September and met with Hitler and got him to sign a piece of paper, and he came back and he waved the piece of paper over his head and said, I have returned from Germany with peace for our time. Well, it didn't last very long, because on September the 1st, 1939, at 4:45 a.m., some 1.5 million German troops invaded Poland. And September 3rd, 1939, Britain, finally realizing the threat Hitler posed, declared war on Germany. And by May of 1939, Chamberlain had resigned, Churchill had become prime minister, and unity in the cause was celebrated. Disunity evaporated as Britain recognized a conflict and came together. And as Churchill said, he said, when there is no enemy within, the enemies outside cannot hurt you. When there is no enemy within, the enemies outside cannot hurt you. There is also unity that arises from a recognized goal. Now, the goal of the Allies was very simple, and I think we can all agree with it. It was the death of Adolf Hitler and the total destruction of the Nazi Party. Their goal was to be victorious. And as Churchill once said, he said, you ask what is our aim. I can answer in one word. It is victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be. Without victory, there is no survival. When a people have a recognizable goal, it unites them just as it did the Allies. Now think of it. All the men and women from those 16 different countries, from many countries, different ethnicities and customs, all working toward one goal, victory. To overcome the enemy. Churchill said, as long as we have faith in our own cause and an unconquerable will to win, victory will not be denied us. We must all have the same goal if there is to be unity and there is to be victory. There's the unity of personal responsibility toward achieving the goal. There will always be those who will, for whatever reason, refuse to fight, to take personal responsibility in a country's conflict, and that is their right, especially in a democratic country such as ours. But I do find it ironic that those who choose not to fight only have that choice because of men and women who chose to fight and do their duty. If we were ever to see a tyrant arise in this country, if we were ever to see a Mussolini or a Hitler arise in this country, there would be no choice about fighting. You would, or you would perish. I remember my dad enlisted before the draft. My dad was a member of the RCAF in the Second World War. And I remember I asked him, I said, why did you go before you were drafted? He said, because I saw the fight coming. And he said, I knew it had to be done. I think my dad looked around. He had a good job at what would become NBTEL at the time. But I think he looked around and he realized that we could lose it all if the men of this country, and the women for that matter, did not fight Hitler and Nazism. As G.K. Chesterton said this, the true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. Then there is the unity of generations and experience. In conflict, it is true that mainly it is the older men who make the decision to go to war and the younger men who fight it. But in the trenches there is unity. There must be unity. The younger men need someone to help them survive. The older men who have been in the conflict for a while have a responsibility to teach the younger how to survive and give them a sense of unity. The younger need the wisdom and the guidance of the old need the strength and the enthusiasm of the young. And it is a bonding experience when that takes place. When the old take responsibility for the young and the young take responsibility for the old, it bonds us to each other. I remember one time my dad was flying out of Britain, and his captain decided that all the flight crew were going to go out to a restaurant, and they came to the door, and there's kind of to be quite honest, he was kind of a snotty waiter, or a snotty maitre d', if you will. He said, "I'm sorry, but only command can eat here." And the captain of Dad's crew said this, "Well, if they don't get in, I don't go in." And they left and they went somewhere else. But that simple statement bonded those younger men to that captain for life. Every Christmas, I can remember as a kid, Dad would call his captain who moved to Nova Scotia after World War II. And they would talk for about a half an hour on the phone. That simple bonding experience brought victory. For victory, there must be unity between the generations. Alexander Dumas, in his book, The Three Musketeers, gave this, and it's kind of a cheesy quote that we've made it into, but I think it has a lot of truth to it. All for one, one for all. United we stand, but divided we fall. We need that in the church as well as in our country. And then there is the unity that arises from obeying orders, or if you will, doing your duty and protecting each other. I am like you. I like John Wayne movies. I like the Westerns, not so crazy about the war movies. And I think that's probably because when the Americans started making movies about the war, they glorified their own participation in it while ignoring that they were kind of late to the party. My dad had a name for American war movies, but I'm a preacher, and I really can't say that because we're in church here this morning. But you know the myth of the American war hero cowboy. He breaks away from the troop and he goes off on his own and he does all of this wonderful stuff. But the truth of the matter is those who broke and did their own thing on the battlefield usually wound up dying on the battlefield. The secret to unity was all doing their duty and watching each other's back while completing their mission. The Roman army conquered the world because of their discipline. They never shirked their duty, and they obeyed their orders no matter what was asked of them, but they did this by protecting the man next to them. If you look at any of the troop formations that Rome had in the time that they were conquering the world, you will see that every man protected the man beside him. This is just one of the troop formations, but you'll notice that the men in the front are protecting the men in the back. The men in the back are protecting the men in the front. And that's what brings unity to a troop, to an army. This is how unity is grown. If in the conflict you can trust the person next to you to look after your best interests, nothing can stop you. In the conflict, as well as in the church, people shirk their duty because they no longer trust the person next to them to look out for them. Theodore Roosevelt said this, "The things that will destroy America are prosperity at any price, peace at any price, safety first instead of duty first." Let me say that again, safety first instead of duty first, and the love of soft living and the get-rich-quick theory of life. We must do our duty, yes, but we must protect the man or the woman next to us. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Today we honor our veterans who many years ago learned these lessons of unity that we so desperately need in the church, in our province, in our country today. The unity of a recognized conflict, the unity of a recognized goal, the unity of personal responsibility toward achieving that goal, the unity of generations and experience, and the unity of obeying orders while protecting each other. Only unity brings victory. And only in unity will we as a country and a province and a town and a church be victorious in the conflict. Let us strive to seek unity with our neighbors, with our friends, with our co-workers. Would you stand with me, please?